All right, let's get going. Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name is Lindsay McGrath. I am the Communications and Events Specialist for the Office of Alumni and Donor Relations at Smith College. I want to welcome you all here today for our alumni webinar series for our presentation on the new normal, coping with working, looking for work, and networking in an age of social distancing. With nearly 3 months of social distancing behind us and not really a clear picture of what the future looks like, we welcome you all here today to learn and engage with Emily Frank, class of '93, a career coach and reinvention specialist, to kind of learn and talk about this challenging topic of navigating work through these rocky times. I just want to start with a few housekeeping notes. Everyone who has joined today is muted to help limit the background noise, but we encourage you to ask your questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A box. We are recording the webinar, so if you need to jump off or you'd just like to revisit and share the content, you'll be able to do that through the Smith College YouTube channel. And if you'd like the slides sent to you after the webinar, please email me at lmcgrath@smith.edu. And I've also posted that at the top of the chat box. So if you want to jot that down, you're welcome to email me and I'll get them right to you. And as I introduce our speaker, I would love for everybody to type in that chat box where you're, excuse me, where you're joining from and your class year. And if you can, select the option to send it to everyone so that we can all see this great Smith network. So Emily Frank, class of '93 MA, is an experienced career reinvention specialist who loves to help people find careers they love. She spent 3 years in Japan after graduation and has a master's degree in counseling. In addition to career counseling work, Emily enjoys public speaking on social justice topics and communications within the offices. She calls Denver home, but works with clients from all over the world. So welcome, Emily, and thank you so much for sharing your time and your talents with us today.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. First thing I really want to say is you're probably getting a ton of mixed messages with everyone telling you that no place is hiring, or if the places that are hiring are all very customer service based. And I just want to start off by kind of allaying those fears. There are places that are hiring. It's not just, grocery shopping, Instacart kinds of things, Grubhub. There are a lot of places hiring. And so I want to start off with that. And I'll kind of give you some basic information because, of course, the hiring looks different from normal. But I'm really glad to have you all here. And so first of all, let me tell you a little bit about me. I love this picture. It cracks me up. This is me and my roommate in front of Park House. Class of '93, so this would have been '89. Looking all kind of '90s up here. Look at how high my pants are. It just cracks me up. And I have really big glasses. So really glad to be here. And I love my Smith community. So as Lindsay said, I did spend some time living and working in Japan. And then in 2006, I went and got my master's degree in counseling, having really struggled with finding my own career path. And then I worked in a public university in Denver for about 12 years. And this is my third year in private practice doing career counseling and coaching. And so the first thing I really want to talk about here is that the times we're in right now are obviously strange and unprecedented. And so I really just want to give you a moment to sort of normalize the fact that any of the weird stuff that's coming up for you now, any of the discomfort you're feeling, depression, anxiety, these are all really normal things to be feeling right now. And I don't know if you've been kind of following the news on it, but we're definitely seeing a pretty big uptick in the number of people who are kind of processing through all of this. I just read an article in the Harvard Business Review about how being more productive in these times means actually doing less, focusing on fewer things, and feeling kind of less should, like we ought to be doing stuff, we ought to be accomplishing. And the other thing that I think is really interesting is that the studies that are coming out now are demonstrating what you've all probably felt yourselves, that taking in information via Zoom takes up a whole lot more brain power. So we're all just feeling really kind of tired. and stressed out. And if you are one of the many, many people who's lost your job because of this, I got your back. I'm going to help you out and kind of give you some tips on kind of figuring out what's next. A lot of places I know have the extra bump of the $600 on top of regular unemployment, but I believe that wraps up at the end of June. So I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about some of the other pieces, including the really urgent stuff. So when this share goes out, these things in here are all clickable links. So if you have lost your job and haven't applied for unemployment, I encourage you to do it right away. In many states, even if you have taken a hit to your business, but you're self-employed or are a contract worker, you can still apply for unemployment. So, let me know if you need some help with that. I can really help you navigate through it. My contact info is at the end of this session. You're always welcome to email me, and you're also always welcome to join my free Friday Q&A sessions. So let me know if you need information on that. I'm really glad to share it. I also really want to help if you are really struggling to do things like, pay your housing. You can talk to, if you have a landlord, you can talk to that person. And there's some good information here in this link about kind of what you need to know around your rights as an owner or renter of a property. So whether it's your mortgage that you're dealing with or rent, this has some resources here for you. And I am really glad to share this information otherwise as well, but the link in here is for some remote jobs. It's a site called Flex Jobs, which I like a lot because it's a site that does some vetting of jobs and doesn't just kind of leave you on your own, because it can be very intimidating, as you've probably learned, to go out and look for remote jobs on your own, and the information can be really overwhelming. So Flex Jobs kind of walks you through and tells you what the good and bad of each type of remote job is. There's also a link here to a site called Side Hustle, which is a really great resource if you are just looking to kind of increase your income shorter term. So let me know if you want that information. Again, I'm very happy to share it. I should have said at the outset that my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I should let you know that if you are in the process of a legal name change, you'll find that fairly often in most places the courts are paused or not in session. And so it can be really challenging if you're applying for a job and you haven't gotten your legal name change stuff through the system yet. So I have been reaching out to every HR person that I can. And the consensus is that if that's you, if you are kind of in that weird in between sort of transition-y phase with a legal name change, and this also applies if you are getting married or getting divorced, use your real name, the one that feels like the representation of you. If you're trans, that means not your dead name. And if you are changing your name for other reasons, it just means use the name that you identify with moving forward. And what you'll want to do is talk either to HR, if your hoped for new place has an HR person, or to the person who will be your direct manager if there isn't an HR, kind of once you're through the first steps of the process. So in other words, if it looks like they are going to keep moving you forward and they're going to do a background check on you, then all you really need to do is reach out to either HR or your direct supervisor and say, hey, thanks, I'm really excited, enthusiastic about this job. You should know that you will find my work history under dead name or under past legal name. And so that's just kind of a nice little piece of information. You don't necessarily have to out yourself to an employer unless you want to. And I will say the nice thing about doing it at the beginning is that it might save you the hassle of working for a place that just is not capable of honoring who you are. So just a very specific concern that I wanted to address for you all today. If you still have a job, you're probably in this weird place of feeling like you have to work from home, but it's not voluntary working from home, at least for most of us. And so here's what I have found myself through my own hard work and suffering through the efforts, that it's really beneficial for me to have very clear habits. So I set my alarm and I have a routine that I go through, and some of it for me, it feels almost ritual. So my beautiful office space here is actually my kitchen. But I have a whole routine that I go through when I wake up. So, I wake up, take care of the dogs, do the breakfast thing. I usually grab a quick workout. They're not as intense as they were before, but I'm trying to do that as part of my self-care routine. And then I take a quick shower, and then I come into this space. So I actually physically move my computer. I plug it in a different place at night, and I put up my screen, and that all feels a little bit like a commute and helps kind of ground me into the space of working. And it really helps me make a clean break between not working and working. You can do other things as well. I know a lot of people who are taking their dogs for a walk first thing in the morning. I have a friend who has stopped doing this, but initially when she was working from home, found that she actually had to get into her car and drive. And so, it had to be approximately the length of her regular commute. So she would just get in the car and drive for like 5 minutes and then come back home. And then she kind of pared it down as she went. And so she got to the point where she would actually just go out and sit in her car for a couple of minutes and then come back in. And that was kind of how she transitioned from an actual commute to just kind of a mental commute. So see what works for you. I have found it very, very helpful to get dressed, even if what I'm wearing is typically more casual than I would wear to an actual work day. I'm a little bit nicer dressed for you all today. I put on some makeup so that I would not look like a crazy old hag. And I just really feel like sometimes those little steps can be really, really powerful. I would also encourage you to do some research and really figure out the times that you are most productive if you haven't done that already. This is my kitchen workspace here. You can see that there's a mixer. And in this little area here, that's actually my ring light, which is balanced on top of my rice cooker. So your workspace doesn't have to be fancy, but I think it's very, very helpful to have a workspace. And for me, the reason I have this screen here is that so I don't get distracted by the stuff that goes on behind me. So when my dogs walk through, I don't, start staring at them, wondering if they need a walk, all of that kind of stuff. So just having a dedicated workspace, even if it's your goofy little kitchen space here, that helps a lot. And there's a really cool link here on this find out when you're most productive piece. That's just kind of an experiment that you get to do where you really note the times of day when you are at your best. This all changes, of course, if you have a child in the house, especially a younger child who's less self-sufficient. It gets harder to kind of work in your sweet spot of time if you don't have a partner who's kind of helping you manage that. But I still think it's worth knowing kind of when your best and most productive time is during the day. I'm definitely more of a morning person. And so if I don't get that kind of morning ritual in and really begin to process through my work in the morning, I find that the rest of my day is just kind of off and I'm less productive. Another thing I have really enjoyed is what's called the Pomodoro technique. I don't know if you all are familiar with it, but it's a really neat tool where you kind of work in short bursts of activity. And if, like me, you are really kind of a language nerd and you're wondering why it's called Pomodoro technique, it's because the person who created it at the time had one of those kitchen timers that was a tomato. That's 100% the reason it's called that. He would set it and you kind of work in 25-minute bursts. And that can be really helpful too. And then really, really key, make sure that you are taking a lot of breaks. You're gonna find that you need more breaks probably in this situation than you ordinarily would. It'll be a little bit different if you customarily work from home. You're probably more used to it and kind of know how to get into your groove and how to do all of the stuff that you need to do. And you might also not need to go through those kinds of rituals. I actually have a friend, a Smith friend who was a year behind me, and she's been working from home for a number of years. And when I give my advice about, get dressed and work out, she says, yeah, I gave that up in the first week. It just didn't work for me. But again, she's doing it voluntarily and it feels really different. And I think those breaks for yourself are really, really important. I find that I hit the wall a lot more easily in this situation. And so I really need to schedule breaks in, and I really need to be very, very thoughtful about doing things like scheduling meals, because otherwise I'll just cram a sandwich in my face in like 5 minutes and it's thoroughly unsatisfying and I don't feel good for the rest of the day. So I actually am going through in my calendar and putting lunch in there. So I mentioned at the beginning, I promise there are still employers hiring. The deal is that it just looks very, very different than it ever has before. And so what you'll find is that although you can definitely go to places like FlexJobs and Side Hustle, what's really happening more often is that workplaces are hiring, but they are not posting it very much. And so this is where your networking is going to get really, really important. And I'll tell you more about that. But what I would really encourage you to do now, if you have lost your job, or if this situation has just really made it clear to you that you're not entirely happy in your current job, which I'm seeing a lot of, then I would really encourage you to think through what those pieces of dissatisfaction are. If you lost a job you really enjoyed, definitely write that down as well. But it seems like a pretty good space for us all to be really thinking about what is important to us and clarifying our values and what we really need from a job. This is a little nerdy, but the deal with work is that there's these kind of two buckets of satisfaction that we get from our work. There's what's intrinsic satisfaction, which is related to the job itself. You know, that would be talking with people, helping people, the things that are really kind of about the job itself. And there's extrinsic motivation, which is what you get paid and what your benefits are and all of that. And it's really key when you are evaluating whether you enjoy a job or not, whether you would like to do something similar or not, that you pay attention to the things in each of those buckets. And it looks very different for each person. Some folks need a lot more extrinsic reward and some people need more intrinsic, but they're both really important. And so really be clear, think through those and think about what it means to you and what's going to be pleasing to you. So networking, really important in these times. I'm a huge believer that networking is important all of the time anyway, but now is really, really the time to be doing it. And what's really great about networking is that the Seven Sister networks are really, really supportive of this whole process and about kind of helping people move into new spaces. If you don't know how to look for alumni on LinkedIn, let me know. You can email me and I have a real quick sheet to kind of walk you through the process. It's very easy, but you will need to have Smith listed as on your profile, and then you can very easily go through and find other Smith alums. So it's a really cool tool, really valuable thing to do. I apparently forgot to update this because I did this similar presentation to the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, and I didn't edit out Jets. So, Smith alumni, and really important that you are just thinking about who you can network with. So don't forget people like your friends and family. Don't forget people you used to work with, people you maybe went to high school with that you've lost touch with, definitely fellow alums. You can network with other Seven Sister alums. It's, again, a really supportive network. You know, you can talk to your best friend from childhood, just anyone you can think of is fodder for networking. And what you'll want to do at the beginning of networking is ask the person for what's called an informational interview. At a guess, roughly half of you are familiar with the term and half of you aren't. So informational interviewing is pretty much what it sounds like. It's when you reach out to a person and you say, hey, person, your job sounds really interesting, but I don't really know very much about it, and I would love to kind of pick your brain and hear your story. And pardon me, I have allergies. I promise I'm not sick. Not that you could catch it, but just some allergies going on. So you'll ask for this informational interview, and typically you want to ask for in the neighborhood of around half an hour of their time for the informational interview. And then before you actually have your informational interview, you'll want to jot down some questions that you really, really want to be sure that you ask. That could be what kind of training is required to get into the field, what is a typical work day like for that person, what is frustrating to them about the job, what do they love about the job, just all of those things that you really want to know. And the deal with an informational interview is that you also get to ask stuff you wouldn't ask in a formal interview. So you can ask things like, what would be a normal pay range for starting off in this field? What is the work-life balance like in this field? All of those kinds of questions. If you need a starter question sheet, email me. You'll get my email address at the end. I am really glad to share the one that I have. And then here's a really key point. As you're wrapping up your informational interview, you really want to be sure that you are asking for additional connections. And that's whether the conversation went great and you are envisioning yourself doing this job in the future, or if it just kind of wasn't perfect and you think, oh, this is clearly not the field for me. In that case, what you want to do is slightly redirect the conversation. So you'll say something like, wow, it sounds like you're really good at your job. I love your passion for it. I think in general, I'm a person who needs more direct contact with my clients or customers. Who do you know who has more of that direct contact? And may I use your name when I reach out to that person? In a perfect world, when you get the contact information from the person you're talking with, you will get the person's full name and email address. Because what you'll find happens fairly often is that they'll say, oh, I'll introduce you to so-and-so, and then they get busy and they forget, or their attention span is like everybody else's in this whole thing, and they just forget to follow up. And that puts you in the sort of awkward place of having to remind them. So if you can get that person's contact info in the moment, then you can give it a few days. And if your person forgets to introduce you, you can just reach out and say, hey, so-and-so said I should reach out to you. A little bit easier. It won't always feel comfortable. So definitely respect your own kind of boundaries around asking for that, and don't feel like you have to push. Oh, here's my thing on virtual interviewing. So in a normal situation, I encourage you to have your informational interviews over coffee with someone, and you're going to pay for their coffee. Obviously, you can't do that now. And so what I'm telling people for right now is, as much as you can, ask your interviewee for the name and address of a favorite local coffee shop. And then you can follow up sometimes with a gift card to that coffee shop. Again, you're asking for around 30 minutes, you're asking for connections, and you get more room than you would in a more formal interview. I was talking to someone the other week who had an informational interview with someone in ed tech, educational technology, and found out pretty quickly that it was a little bit too in the weeds of the actual technology. What this person wanted was a lot more planning and kind of almost curriculum development. And so felt really awkward at the end of the conversation because she wasn't quite sure how to turn it in that direction. Again, if it's clear to you that it's not someone who does what you want to be doing, see if you can steer it in that direction. So say something like, I'm better at the higher end kind of planning of events and things. Who do you know who does that? And may I reach out to them using your name? Let me know if you have questions about the informational interview process, because I'm really glad to share any resources that I have. So a lot of times, I think what we are wondering in this weird new situation is, what does recruiting and hiring even look like? And so what I'm finding through all the research I'm doing is that there are a lot of places that are some new methods of vetting their potential candidates. If you're not familiar with whiteboarding, it's something that has previously been used really heavily in tech positions. Zoom actually has it as a feature where you can actually just turn it on, and people can kind of write on a virtual whiteboard and do problem solving. And so that's a really key element to tech positions. People are really getting to kind of work through coding and that kind of thing on a whiteboard through Zoom. Zoom also lets you do, obviously, presentations, and there are other pieces of software doing the same kind of thing. I had just been using Zoom for about a year and a half before this all started, so it's the platform I'm most familiar with. But we're getting a lot of kind of interviewing, testing, and that sort of thing happening in virtual settings, as well as onboarding. And I think the onboarding is really key at this point. And I think it's fine to push back if you get a job offer and they want you to do any of the onboarding stuff in person. Generally, what I'm telling people to say is there's an immunocompromised person in my household and I'm not comfortable doing this in person. And you can say that whether it's true or not, they're not going to check. It might just be that you feel really protective of your own health and your family's health, and that's totally fair. Now, if they somehow know that you already live alone or already know that you live alone, you can just say, I'm not comfortable doing it in person. can we do a virtual onboarding or whatever, tours of the office kinds of things, whatever. And I'm seeing also an increasingly, maybe not increasing, I'm seeing a fairly high number of workplaces that are doing video interviews. If you've never done a video interview, they're very strange. I don't love them. But what happens is you will essentially get a file in your email, and it's a link, and there's a pre-recorded set of questions in there, and then there's a timer, and you get a certain amount of time to answer the questions. Most of the time you will get the questions in advance, so you have a little bit of time to prep for the actual taped session of the interview. But one of the reasons those are often really tricky is that they it requires a really good connection, and the technology will usually record the full answer even if your connection suddenly drops. So it's really frustrating, because if you have a poor internet connection, you might start to answer a question and then your call drops, and then that means that is the full answer to the question. And so you might find that you need to go back and tell them that you suddenly lost your internet connection, and they'll send you usually just that file so you can re-record your answer to it. All of that to say that if you have a video interview, I really encourage you, if possible, to do it from a hardwired computer, a hardwired LAN connection, so that you have a greater chance of the call quality being pretty good throughout the process. And I think it's really, really important for us to be very, very mindful of being social with each other in these times, and don't feel like it has to be often, because again, we're finding that this takes a lot of energy out of us to do these kind of virtual times with friends. But I think it's really key because it's hard. And those check-in times with our loved ones, I think, are super important right now. And it can be a huge balm to actually have time when you can connect with the people you love in the world. What I've been doing recently with a group of my friends is doing distance wine. And so it's set up kind of like one of those virtual picnics. I don't know if you've seen the virtual picnic, or the distance picnic blankets, where there's kind of circles, cut out circles, and then there's a space between each circle, and there's the center ring. So you can each kind of take turns going up to get food. And then the center circle is 6 or 8 feet apart from everything else. And then the little circles where people sit are also 6 or 8 feet from everyone else. And that's a really nice thing to do, because you actually get to be in person with your loved ones. But it's not possible for everyone. And if it's not possible for you, then definitely think about the social piece of it being a really key part of your self-care. We need people. Introverts need people. Don't fall into buy into that myth of introverts are perfectly happy in this situation, especially if you are an introvert, because it's going to add to your stress. Humans need humans. We're social creatures. I always say solitary confinement is a punishment in prisons for a reason. We are at our best when we are interacting with others, and what it looks like for you is going to be obviously very personal and very different, but this is a really key time to be extremely aware of this as part of our self-care routine. On the subject of self-care, I will say that I really kind of divide it into basically 2 camps. There is kind of long-term self-care, and that's stuff like, honoring your bedtime and trying to get enough sleep, exercising, eating healthily, all of those kinds of pieces, and socializing. But I think it's really important also to note that there's what I call acute self-care. And acute self-care is when you just kind of can't deal with anything, and you really have to spend an hour lying on the couch, when you decide that dinner is just going to be a bag of Doritos, when you decide, you know what, I'm not going anywhere, I'm going to overindulge in my alcoholic beverage of choice. I'm going to have ice cream 3 meals a day. These things are all absolutely part of acute self-care. And I really encourage you to have some days that you build in and plan around where you're just not going to be productive, because we need a lot more downtime, as I said. And really just having those days planned so that you know they're coming. When you just have absolute permission not to commit to anything at all is really, really important. I took a day a couple of weeks ago, and it was actually really good timing because there was a Xena Warrior Princess marathon on, and I spent legitimately all day on the couch watching Xena. And it was great because I had hit my wall, right? Just like we all are doing, I think, more often these days. I needed to stop and kind of disengage my brain and get away from that feeling I had inside of I need to be busy. And it's an internal message that we've all gotten from pretty early on, I think, that, you know, being busy equals merit. And there are going to be a lot of times when you just need not to be busy. I would encourage you to look into other pieces of self-care that you have perhaps done in the past as well, if they've helped you. So journaling, if that's been useful to you. I'm doing a lot of gardening these days. It's a really nice break to my day. I can just get up, you know, go out, harvest some shiny new lettuce leaves, and feel like I've really accomplished something, but it hasn't been sort of an external commitment. We need each other in these times. And so the other thing I really, really encourage you to do is, if you have a bad day, and you're gonna, reach out to your loved ones and just talk through your bad day. It's hard. Everything is hard right now. And just kind of create that space with your friends so that they know they can reach out to you as well when things get to be too much, because it's really easy for things to get to be too much. We did get a question here in advance, but before I dive into this question, I definitely wanted to know what your questions are, even if they are pretty specific, as this one is here. This is someone who recently completed an MFA in theater, but of course, there's not a whole lot of live theater happening, and so this person wonders how to adapt an education or skill set for curation of live events in this current reality. And so this is absolutely possible. And if you are actually on the call, I would like to get a little bit more info from you about it. But what you can really do is talk about how, in your application paperwork, about how this process is actually very similar to doing it in person. It's just happening in virtual spaces. And so that would probably be something you would put in a cover letter. But you also can change the emphasis of your resume to more of that curation, to reflect more of that curation piece of it. So I would recommend in this case that you lead with a really nice, strong skills section at the top of your resume that really encapsulates that kind of information. So that would be having some bullet points in that beginning part that are, you know, managed X event, marketed, etc. And that's all going to kind of lead the resume off. It's going to be your starting point for the resume. So you're really speaking to what that thing looks like. And then in your cover letter, you'll say something like, as you can see, I've done a lot of this kind of work, and I have learned how to do that in virtual spaces using tools such as, and kind of demonstrate that in the cover letter. I hope that answers your question, but I can definitely get more specific with you in terms of what it really looks like for you. It's a tricky situation, but I can definitely kind of coach you through it. I would just want to know a little bit more about kind of where you are and what that looks like for you. And before I forget, I do want to give you all my contact info here. And so when I finish yakking at you about this, I will open it up for questions, and Lindsay's going to read me your questions. But please feel free to reach out to me. It's emily@denvercareercatalyst.com, or the phone number is 720-839-9769. Happy to respond either way. Just FYI, you will find that generally I'm better at responding to emails and texts than I am to voicemails, because I'll listen to the voicemail and formulate my answer to it and then forget that I haven't actually given you the answer to it. And if it's an email or a text, then I actually have evidence that I have not actually answered your question right there in front of me. But I am absolutely glad to take your questions, talk you through your concerns, any of that. And again, I do have a free Friday Q&A call. It's a Seven Sister call. I market it pretty heavily on Facebook. I don't market it. I send word out on Facebook. And if you aren't on Facebook or would like a reminder, just let me know and I will add you to my email reminder list. It's just a free kind of office hour, real loose. There's nothing formal to it. It's just a space for us to support each other and for you to ask your questions and for me and the other folks on the call to help answer it. All right, that is the bulk of what I have to say for you all today. Lindsay, do we have questions?
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much, Emily. You can use either the Q&A or the chat box to type in your questions. There was a question that came in from Becky, and hi, fellow New York City Smithies, which borough do you live in? So not specific to your presentation, but I do love the community aspect of these webinars and how it brings everyone together. I would like to say that if you ever connect with anyone through the chat or the Q&A box on a webinar, we do have an online community that you can find on the alumni website that is fabulous for connecting with people. So, and that's helpful for informational interviewing and finding
Absolutely.
other alums.
And for normalizing things. It's so good to have other folks in your network who are struggling too, and just to see it and to remind yourself that everything is weird and messed up out there.
Oh my goodness. So much of what you said today made me feel that way, by the way. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm not the only one. And especially that burnout, taking a day off. You don't necessarily feel like you should, but, oh, and I see we have a couple of questions coming in, so I'm going to read them.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Sydney asks, can you start a side hustle or remote job in addition to unemployment, or is it one or the other?
Excellent question. So normally it's one or the other. But because everything is so jacked up right now, unemployment offices are still honoring that. And so your unemployment should be based on the last job that you had. And it will kind of give you a maxed out fee or a maxed out price point. So you absolutely can start a side hustle or a part-time job. And if you are not at the point where you're, whatever it is, something like 80% of your normal wage, you will still get that on top of what you have already earned. So you'll fill out, and most places it's weekly. So you'll fill out either the number of hours you've worked or your income for that week. And then if it hasn't reached what the unemployment office feels that you need based on your previous income, you will get that remainder amount. And if you do meet or exceed what they think you need to live on, it will just tell you for that week that you have exceeded the maximum. I had a week, a couple of weeks ago, I'm on the unemployment for self-employed folks because my business took a really bad hit in April. I think I made $80 all of April. And so I'm filing for it. And so I had a week, a couple of weeks ago where I made like $1,600 in a week. Actually, it's more than that. I made almost $2,000 in a week. And so my little thing for that week just says, you've exceeded the maximum. So I'm not going to get anything for that particular week. But you absolutely can do that. And hopefully the part-time job, the remote job, or the side hustle will eventually get you up to the point where you don't need the unemployment anymore. Hopefully you'll even exceed it. But it's an excellent question.
Great. We've had a few more questions come in. So next I have a question from Polly. Emily, I did lose my job and I'm kind of getting used to not working. Do you think my desire to start this career search will happen soon? And how long is too long to wait?
Yeah, I actually have a friend in exactly that same situation. And just last night, she reached out to me for help with her resume because she really enjoys not working. So in the current reality we're all living with, I don't think there's really a too long. And then as to how long it's going to take you to kind of get that motivation back, it's pretty individual, but I'm definitely seeing it take a chunk of time. Generally, I think it takes longer if the job that you lost was not a great fit, because you'll probably have some wounds that need to heal a little bit from that situation. And so what I really encourage people to do in this situation is to set very, very small and attainable goals for moving forward. Because it can get to the point where you're feeling just kind of gross about the whole thing, and it feels overwhelming and just exhausting. And I'm a big one I get overwhelmed pretty easily because I see the whole of everything that needs to happen, and that just paralyzes me, and then I accomplish nothing. So set tiny, tiny goals for yourself on this front. So that could be, find 2 other Smith alums in my field. That's your goal for the day. You don't have to reach out to them. You don't have to plan to talk with them. You just have to find them. Or review LinkedIn profile. And all you do that day is look at your LinkedIn profile and see if there's something that you don't like about it. So those tiny goals are really helpful to kind of maintaining that motivation, because if you set a really small goal for yourself, like, ask an old boss for virtual coffee, then you get the lift of actually having accomplished what you set out to do, and you haven't bogged yourself down in the overwhelm craziness of things. If you start to feel like it's too long internally, that's kind of your best gauge. Please reach out to me and we can begin to walk through some of these steps pretty slowly. And anything that I do with you all via email, I will just give to you as a gift from me to you. If you do want to work with me, I do have a sliding fee scale, and I also have a sort of reduced 7-sister rate. So don't feel afraid of what it's going to cost you. Just reach out to me. We will absolutely make something work. And then all I would ask really in return for that is some additional referrals if you have other friends going through this. So please don't hesitate to reach out. A lot of it we can do for free. And a lot of it is just, I will direct you to some resources. I'm glad to do resume reviews, that kind of thing.
Great. We've had another one come in from Mary. I've been a stay-at-home mom for the past 15 years and was just starting to plan how to get back
doesn't
to
that
work.
suck?
I know, timing. I used to be an antitrust lawyer, but I would like to do research and writing work or editing proofing work, ideally from home. I'm not an especially social person and have trouble with interviews, so I feel especially overwhelmed in this new environment and with networking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, you're not alone, Mary. There are loads of people in this exact situation. And so what you can do is start your networking again really, really small. That might be reaching out to your sister or to your best friend and really kind of talking through what it is you want to be doing. One of the big barriers for a lot of us to networking is we don't deeply understand what our loved ones do, and they don't deeply understand what we do or what we want to do. So start off really, really easily with a conversation with someone that you know and trust about what you want to be doing and maybe what that person's doing. And then ask if they know anyone doing anything in that arena. And regarding that gap in your resume, don't worry too much about that. That used to be a really big problem and took us long enough. But now in the 21st century, employers are more aware that there are a lot of perfectly legitimate reasons that people will have not been working for pay for a while. And you can fill that gap in your resume with the things that you have done not for pay. That could include PTA work, any volunteering you've done, anything like that, committees you've been on, etc. And that can also be on your LinkedIn profile. And then what you'll do on your LinkedIn profile is you will give yourself the title you are seeking. The only time you can't give yourself a job title like that is when it is something that is legally protected. So like you can't call yourself a surgeon unless you're actually a surgeon. You can't call yourself a social worker unless you actually have social worker credentials. But the rest of us can absolutely put on there whatever we want. So your LinkedIn profile can say researcher or whatever you want it to say. And then with your networking, again, keep it really small because it's very overwhelming these days. I'm a total social butterfly extrovert and I'm overwhelmed by it these days. And so don't feel like it has to be big. It doesn't have to be big even in normal times. And especially now, it can be just one little person at a time. And if you don't have anyone in your immediate circle who does what you hope to be doing, spend 10, 15, 20 minutes a day on LinkedIn looking for other Smith alums who are in that field. You don't even have to begin by doing outreach. Just start by finding out who they are. And then as you have the mental space for it, do a single outreach. Hey, Deborah, I'm also a Smith alum. I'm looking to transition into what you're doing, but I have some questions. Can we chat? That kind of conversation can happen. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a real true and formal informational interview, but definitely you can begin to build your network in very small steps like that. Let me know if you have questions. I also have a free class through Thinkific. It's just a 5-day networking challenge. So let me know if you would like that as well. It's just going to kind of walk you through 5 days of doing some networking. It's pretty small and easy. And again, it's free. So please let me know if you'd like that.
Awesome. We've had a couple of questions come in about LinkedIn, so I'll kind of read them both. I'm relatively new to LinkedIn. Do you have advice for using it more effectively? And then also to piggyback on that last question, Stamy says, I recently left an ED role in Charlotte, North Carolina to move to Ithaca, New York for family reasons, and I am looking for the next gig. Thoughts on LinkedIn profile? Would you use consultant or self-employed? Something else.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I would. Yeah. Excellent. So yeah, I would generally say go for whatever sounds a little bit fancier on LinkedIn. And in this case, I would say probably go a little bit more the route of consultant, because it also sends the message that you're hireable on LinkedIn. And in terms of kind of using LinkedIn effectively and making those connections, start there. Start with kind of deciding what your title is going to be, so that you're really kind of marketing it. And then spend some time looking around at the profiles of people who do what you do or what you hope to be doing, and liberally borrow. LinkedIn has some really good tutorials on the site that you can also have a look at. But generally what they say, among other things, is that you do need a profile picture. And in the US, of course, we don't really put photos in our resumes. And so this is kind of the answer to that question. Humans like to make sort of eye contact, even if it's just with your picture. So a profile picture, nice kind of neutral background is ideal for your LinkedIn profile picture. Although I will tell you that before I had a bunch of professional photos taken, my LinkedIn profile picture was me at Taronga Zoo in Sydney, because the giraffe enclosure looks out over Sydney Harbor. And so this is beautiful, like the opera house in the background, that kind of thing. So just a picture that you feel pretty good about. And then you'll want to complete as much of it as you can. So all of those sections, as much information as you can put in there, because that will read as a more complete profile. And then play around with what you put in that kind of headline section, your title, what you want to say about yourself. That first thing that the people see is going to be really telling and important. When you decide, and I'll just walk you through it real quick, if you want to look for other alumni, make sure that you have Smith in your education. You just put that, it's a drop-down tab. You'll start to type in Smith College and it'll bring it up as an option. You can tell because it has the logo that that's the right one. And so you just click on that and it'll ask you the name of your degree, you graduated, all of that kind of stuff. And so if you have that in your profile, then you can, on LinkedIn, you can actually go to that search box and put in Smith College. And it'll give you a few options. Again, choose the one with the logo. And when you click on it, you'll see a little drop-down menu on the left that has a bunch of information, but not a bunch, but has some options for you. But the bottom one says alumni. And if you click on that alumni box, it will give you a list of alumni and you can narrow it down. So you can narrow it down geographically for you New Yorkers. You can narrow it down by industry. You can narrow it down by workplace, those kinds of things. And so it's a pretty easy way to begin your networking. I really wish there were a Seven Sister option, because there might be a martyr, for instance, who does what you want to do. And you can't find her quite that in that streamlined, easy way. But it will begin to suggest connections for you once you've hit a certain point of kind of completion with your profile. I'm a fairly open LinkedIn networker, so if you have questions about what it looks like or how to use it, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I think I'm just Emily Frank. I might be Emily K. Frank. I can't ever remember, but there's a photo of me on there. So that's definitely me. So, and I have Smith in my education, so you can find me fairly easily. Please feel free to connect with me. Just I ask that here's a pro tip for using LinkedIn. When you do reach out to someone to connect, make sure you personalize that message. It doesn't have to be long, but it will tell the person why you're reaching out, and also it will allow you to weed out the skeevy people. I have now twice gotten weird, creepy messages from men on LinkedIn. First one was that I had pretty eyes, whatever that even means. And the second one was just like this whole stupid thing about, gee, you're pretty. It was weird and creepy. And don't hit on me on LinkedIn. Seriously, don't hit on me on LinkedIn. It's freaking LinkedIn. But the good news is I was able to avoid those creepy guys because they actually gave me messages. And I just opted to ignore them. So when you reach out to people, be pretty transparent, give them why you're reaching out, and because you all are not going to be weird and creepy and hitting on people on LinkedIn, they will almost always connect with you. The caveat there is that people take more time to respond to messages on LinkedIn, so don't give up if you reach out to someone and don't hear back for a week or so. We have the bandwidth that we have, and I have noticed a longer gap in responsiveness on LinkedIn. It's usually week and a half, and I'm seeing that it's often taking people more like 2 weeks to respond. And so just be a little bit patient with them on LinkedIn. But I'm going to respond very quickly if you do connect with me on LinkedIn, because it's part of what I do. So absolutely feel free to connect with me and to reach out that way. I hope that answered your questions. Let me know if you have specifics. I can answer them offline.
Thank you so much. I just want to say this is such a valuable resource, and thank you. There's so many questions that are coming in. Some are specific, and I'd like to also just point back to Emily's coaching hour, drop-in hour on Fridays, and to make sure you email her to get that information. If we don't get to your question, there's so many good questions coming in. I do have a question from Camille about informational interviews. Is it better to email or call on the phone or video chat? Also, what are some good tips to overcome that fear of contacting people? So I know we touched on that with LinkedIn and everything. So just a little bit more information there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So in terms of how you reach out to people, it's really a question of what you're most comfortable with. So, make it easy on yourself. If email is the most comfortable for you, use that. Same with phone or video. I have tended to prefer video because I get that much more kind of information about the person from seeing them. But that's me. And so when I've had people reach out to me for informational interviews, I've really kind of let them dictate what they want from it. And so I'll usually say something like, they'll say, can I do an informational interview? And I will usually say, yes, first of all, and I prefer Zoom because I like to see people and I get a lot of information from that level of contact. But if you're not comfortable with Zoom, or if you feel really overwhelmed right now, whatever medium you choose is absolutely fine. And the feeling nervous is so normal. So I'm really glad that you asked that. And what you'll have to do is just kind of power through it. So take someone who's an easy initial contact. And again, that may very well be another Smith alum because it's such a generally supportive community. If you have a very specific arena in which you would like to do an informational interview with someone and you're feeling really, really anxious about it, reach out to me because I am really glad to introduce you to someone and to facilitate that first conversation, even if it's not someone I already know. So let's say, for instance, that you are really curious about, getting into real estate. Let me know, and I will reach out to realtors through LinkedIn on my side of things, and then as much as possible get an email address from that person, and then email introduce the two of you. once you've been through at least one of those, it feels a lot less like a creepy cold call. If you would rather do it on your own, just remember that it's a very human contact that you're making with people. And if you imagine yourself in 5 or 10 years being kind of in this new career that you really want to get into, and someone reached out to you and said, I'm really curious about this, but I don't know very much about it, you would probably be really happy to answer that person's questions. And really, believe me, people absolutely are really very happy to answer your questions 95% of the time. 5% of the people you reach out to are jerks, and you can't know that in advance, so you just let them go, right? The people who don't enjoy doing informational interviews with people are probably not going to be that useful to you anyway. They tend to be very self-involved or are kind of dealing with their own, I was going to swear right there, dealing with their own stuff right now. And so if you don't get a response, assume that that person has too much going on or is dealing with something else. But again, if you want a little bit of kind of extra support around that, I'm really glad to introduce you to anyone. Just tell me specifically what industry you're looking for.
That's great. Okay, so I know we're getting close on time. I think we might have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. And Nola has asked, if you had speaking events that were canceled, can you still include them on your resume?
You can, absolutely. You'll just put something like accepted as speaker for X conference, accepted as keynote address for whatever. And then you put something in parentheses like deferred or event canceled or whatever. But the fact that you've been accepted to do that is, I think, a really important thing to put on. And it reminds me that I need to put on my LinkedIn profile that I was accepted to be a speaker at my national conference. And of course, that's been canceled. So yes, absolutely put that on there.
Great. I've had a few questions that come in about skills building during this time. So Francis asked, I'm researching skills building through online courses in marketing and content writing. This is a new field for me and I feel like I'm stabbing in the dark. I like the informational interview strategy for finding out from friends' contacts what the field is like, but any suggestions on finding best options for online study?
Yeah, so absolutely. And I think a lot of us are in that place. And part of it is like we feel like we should be using this downtime to learn new skills. What I really recommend for finding new skills to learn is that you start with the low-hanging fruit and the free options. Google has an online learning site called Digital Garage that has a lot of really good stuff about marketing. There are other free sites, Khan Academy, Udemy, all of those that are free. Start there and start with something short because you don't want to get overcommitted. I was, whose was it? Some university was offering a bunch of free courses around just COVID and coronaviruses and kind of their transmission. And it was really interesting to me initially. So I signed up and I stuck it in my calendar, and then I really lost interest in it because it's not that, like, some basic information is enough to capture my attention for a while. But this was all about, historic viruses, and it was way too much. And I wasn't that interested. And I couldn't keep the information in my head. And so the other piece of advice I would give you is be sure that it's something that you're really interested in, so you don't feel like it's just kind of purely obligation, but that some of it's kind of fun and interesting too. So again, I like Google Digital Garage, I like Khan Academy, I like Udemy and Thinkific. And so you can let me know if there's a specific piece of it you would like to tackle. But you can also look at things like your local Chamber of Commerce, your local Small Business Development Center. And there's, I don't know if you all know SCORE. I think it must be an acronym because it's always written in all caps, but I don't know what it stands for. But SCORE is a group of business mentors who are all volunteers, and they go through the Small Business Development Center. And so you actually can ask to be hooked up with a mentor, but also SCORE and SBDC also offer free or low cost workshops and classes and things like that. I see a lot of them and the recordings are always free, but they're also live events. There's webinars. And so if you see, like I did one recently on search engine optimization, and I was really glad that it was free because I am not that interested in it. I just feel like I should know something about it. And so I was not at my best in terms of attention. So again, be really mindful of what actually is interesting to you so that you are making the process as easy as you can on yourself.
Excellent. And maybe just one more just to piggyback on the skills building, talking about recommending volunteering as a strategy to expand skill sets and networking.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
During this time.
Yeah. And so volunteering is something I'm normally a little bit wary of recommending as an experience builder to people because it's, you know, it can be such a time suck, but in this environment, I think it's a really great way to get kind of known within your community and to build some skills, and cast your net pretty wide because there's some really interesting volunteer opportunities out there. I'm going to, eventually, when I get to it, I'm going to sign up to be a volunteer for the Society of Human Resource Managers, SHRM, because they are doing a bunch of stuff, everything virtually. And it's a really great way for me to network with some human resources folks so that I have that information to pass along to my clients. But also it's a really interesting field to me. And so I'm going to be doing some volunteering with them. So I think this is actually a really good time to be doing it. But again, make it easy on yourself. So make sure that it's something, an organization that you're legitimately passionate about and not something like you really feel like you're supposed to be getting involved with. And seek volunteer opportunities that seem like they're going to make sense to you. They're going to fit who you are. They're going to fit the time you feel like you can allocate to them. And that will get you the connections that you really need or the skills that you really need as you kind of go through this next chapter. So again, make all of these things as easy on yourself as you can. And let me know if I can answer any specific questions for you. But honestly, the biggest piece of that is going to be your level of interest in it. Don't bow to the pressure of you're supposed to be doing X or Y or Z, but look at the stuff that sounds like it's actually going to ring your bell a little bit.
Okay, let's see. So I know I want to be respectful of everyone's time and especially Emily, and thank you so much. I can see your Friday hours must, you know, I can imagine that they are filled with questions. We still have quite a few, and I apologize to everyone if I didn't read your question, but I know Emily has offered her email and also that career hour to connect. So I want to say thank you again, and thank you to everybody for being here today, so we navigate these really strange times. I know this has been helpful for me, so I hope for you all as well. And if you would like to email me again, I'm just going to say my email address is lmcgrath, M-C-G-R-A-T-H @smith.edu. So I've already received a number of requests, but if you'd like the slides, I will get them right out to you. And thanks again. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for spending a piece of your day with me. And thank you, Lindsay, for getting this all organized.
Yeah, wonderful. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Email me if you have questions.